A light fog hung over the water surface of the river. Night birds chirped out of the darkness, and cicadas played along with their chirping. Twilight is a great time to go fishing. Few people go out fishing at such a time, which is what Simon used. At such moments, you can really relax and enjoy the atmosphere of nature. And most importantly, a good catch. Before launching the boat, Simon surveyed the water surface. Fry were playing at the bottom, timidly swam to the shore. Lightly touch the transparent surface, and they will scatter in different directions. The boat is now on the move. Simon jumped into it and swam deep into the river. A light breeze blew in my back, making hundreds of goosebumps run down my back. The guy shuddered. I wrapped myself in a warm jacket more tightly. Having sailed away from the shore enough, Simon took up the fishing rod. It didn't take long to wait for the first call. The fish pecked at the bait after a couple of minutes. A good old worm with a special additive always helps. The second time I threw it, this time I had to wait a little longer. Fishing went with a bang. Half of the bucket is already filled, another one is ready. Simon got into the excitement, forgot about time, and not only about that. Fishing took him so long that he only thought about the fish and the river, which had no end, no edge. He didn't even notice how a strange-looking fish swam up to his boat. A very large size, with a roundish shape and angular sides, and the head looked like something human. As soon as Simon looked overboard to wash his hands, the strange fish swam away. The guy noticed this, began to peer into the water, but that fish is no longer to be seen. She must have appeared, he thought, taking up the fishing rod again. And as soon as he threw it, suddenly this fish jumped out of the water, clinging to Simon's hand. The guy screamed, grabbed the creature by the tail, and began to pull, but it wouldn't budge. The teeth were so deeply embedded in the flesh that it was impossible to tear them off. I had to use my fists. From a few blows, the fish flew off my hand, hit the side of the boat, and sank into the water. Blood flowed profusely from the hand, trickled onto the water surface, thereby luring even more of these creatures. Simon gripped the wound tightly. Of course, you can't stop the blood that way. I had to sacrifice the sleeve of my jacket so that the bleeding wouldn't bother me anymore. It remains only to choose from here. He didn't have time to swim a couple of meters, as they attacked him again. This time, 3 fish bit through his flesh. All 3 monsters aimed at his forearms, forcing him to release the oars from his hands. The body caught a convulsion. The pain was increasing. Simon, unable to repel the river creatures, began to beat against the sides of the boat. Those, though not immediately, but unhooked, taking with them pieces of flesh. Simon fell to the bottom of the boat, screaming loudly, but no one heard him. Even more creatures came. A whole flock, several dozen of these creatures, gathered for the catch. They jumped out of the water, flying over the boat. The guy could only defend himself, slightly raising his bleeding hands. When one of these fish was on board, Simon quickly grabbed an oar, sat down and smashed her head with several blows. Rising with difficulty, he began to swing the paddle, driving away the monsters, and there are more and more of them. From a few dozen to a whole 100, now it is impossible to fight off such a horde. From such a battle, the oar broke. Soon everything was quiet as soon as Simon grabbed the second oar. The water monsters stopped terrorizing the guy. Simon stood on alert for a minute until the tension in his body subsided. While there is time, we must sail away. It's quite difficult to swim on one oar. It's impossible, my hands hurt terribly. It's still a long way to the shore. The guy hoped that someone would hear him, but again emptiness is his listener pleading for help. Simon completely despaired, from which he clutched his head and began to cry. He will have to sit in the middle of the river until morning, hoping that someone will find him during the day. Suddenly the water bubbled in front of the bow of the boat. Simon noticed this. Each time there were more bubbles, a small wave appeared in that place and headed towards the boat, increasing in size. This wave turned out to be very unusual. Those creatures were approaching their victim with a whole wall, raising a water stream. Simon covered himself with his hands, although he knew that it would hardly help him. A wave of their river monsters covered him, swallowing him along with the boat. 2 fishermen found the guy's corpse the next day, floating on the surface of the water. They noticed his gnawed, scarlet back, with a protruding spine. The fishermen threw down their fishing rods and ran to call someone. Meanwhile, several of those creatures swam closer to the shore. The second story. A heart-rending scream rang out in the courtyards. Meanwhile, I was studying in the garage, enjoying the spring twilight over a bottle of beer, but I didn't have time. Something that has been terrorizing us for a long time has taken someone away again. And maybe I'll be his victim too. But it's worth starting over. I live in an urban-type settlement, in a 2-story house, on the 2nd floor. The studio apartment was inherited from a brother who moved to the city. I don't care where and how to live, the most important thing is that there is a roof under my head and everything you need is nearby. Life would be peaceful, if not for one thing, something wandering around the courtyards of our village. You can ask a bunch of questions, but the answer is the same: no one cares. Do not bother your head with all these subtleties. Moreover, the settlement is close to the status of a ghost settlement. That's why I don't think anyone will help us. What is this something? You ask. If I could talk to the dead, I answered the question, but I'm not deprived of such a gift, so I can't answer. Of course, there are those who have seen the monster, but the catch is that they all describe it differently. Then a 2-meter steel alien, then a Mothman, then a Chupacabra. The only thing that does not change in the description is the smell of fish. Lovecraft's stories with his terrible marine aesthetics immediately come to mind. Only there is no sea near the village, one seedy river, all the fish there have died. Does it count? When and how this monster appeared is unclear. Suddenly, people began to disappear, and abruptly and quickly, as if they had fallen through the ground. They thought they had just quietly moved out, but it is unknown where. There was a version about a cannibal maniac, and they made a mistake again. They also searched in the river, and again nothing. Then the most attentive investigator, my old school friend, noticed that the water had dropped a little and turned a little black. It was one evening, he came to me to drink beer. From a few glasses, he told me a little more. He stayed a little near the river that day, wandered along the shore. I went a little further, where the water is too deep, and no one swims. It seemed to him as if someone had surfaced from under the water. He didn't have time to really see, but he realized that there was something big in the water, and clearly it didn't seem to him. He did not become a comrade to tell anything. He told me first. After that evening there were rumors about a monster in our village. It is unclear where these rumors came from, but it is always easier to accept that otherworldly forces are to blame. Otherwise, how else to explain the missing people and the smell of fish in the morning? There was simply no other explanation. Moreover, over time, screams began to be heard at night. It became clear to everyone, not a person is involved here, but a real extraterrestrial evil. It all sounds ridiculous, but that's the way it is. It was like being in a typical horror story. In total, 10 people were missing, 11, taking into account tonight. Most likely, I will be the 12th. Clacking sounds were heard from the courtyards. Something was approaching the garage cooperative. I was hiding in the dark of the garage, trying not to even breathe. The tisk-tisk was getting closer and closer. And so, this monster appeared in front of me. A gigantic crustacean creature without a head. The pointed feet clattered loudly on the ground, shaking everything around. The claws, real crushers with teeth, clattered, hitting something every now and then. An orange light shone from the hole where the head should have been, as if from hell. Pale flesh pulsed, small tentacles wriggled, basking in the infernal light. Various parts of the victims' bodies bulged out of this flesh. Someone else was alive and calling for help, but because of the guttural growling, their pleas were not heard. I don't know what saved me then, the sharp smell of gasoline and diesel fuel or lady luck. The monster stood for a minute and moved on. I sat in the garage until the morning. As soon as the first rays of the sun appeared, I returned to repairing my car in order to escape from here. I'll move in with my brother, stay with him for a while until I find a place to live. Yes, that's how it will be. I'll sort out that apartment somehow. I'll come up with a reason for moving. But I don't intend to stay here any longer. It was enough for me to see someone who steals people at night.